3 years ago, I made a pretty controversial video. I set out to finally complete every Metroid Prime game after having only grown up with the first one and having completed every 2D Metroid already at that point. And I liked all 3 of them. Well, if all 3 of them means Prime 1 and Prime 3 and not Prime 2. Looking back now, I think being used to Prime 1 made it a fun breeze to get through, whereas Prime 2 was a new learning experience full of growing pains as I found out how these Prime games actually work outside of just the first one. Here I had a new world with new mechanics to traverse it with, new enemies to fight with new suit upgrades, new story motivations based on a new race of ancient beings, and honestly, it felt just different enough from Prime 1 that I thought it was a bad thing. Well, I just played through Prime 2 again, with mouse and keyboard controls thanks to Prime Hack, and I have to say, a lot of my opinions back then were pretty biased and a little misguided. Today, we're going to remedy some of the things I said about Prime 2 all that time ago. First things first, the Dark Ether. My first time through this game, I didn't like this at all. I didn't like having to run from portal to portal every time I wanted to swap from one to the other. I didn't like that half of this game's world is just the same world you were running through moments ago, but with a darker coat of paint, and I didn't like how the damage over time was handled. This time through though, I thought running from portal to portal really didn't take that long. Sure, it can be annoying to reach some places in the dark world only to realize that you need to be in the light world to interact here, but you're never really that far away from portals in this game, so I don't see that as a very big deal like I used to. When it comes to the reusing of the regular world under a dark ether coat of paint, yeah, I don't hate this anymore either. Some of the areas will look pretty samey as you run to and from them time and time again, but the fact that certain parts of these two worlds need to be traversed in such different ways from one another makes it stay interesting to me the entire time. And finally, speaking of the way the damage over time was utilized, I still kinda think this system is imperfect. Being introduced to the fact that you take damage outside of these light fields installs a threat of death to you very early on, but right after you've completed the first temple you get the dark suit, and all of a sudden the damage is so minimal it hardly matters. I think the dark suit upgrade is huge for making the player feel like they've just received a gigantic buff that will help them plenty throughout the game. I just think that they gave it to us a little too early here. Unfortunately, you're also gonna be stuck in this dark suit until what is practically the end of the game, so not only is this threat minimized for a great portion of your playtime in Prime 2, but you also get so used to this look, it's not even funny. I spent so long in my recent playthrough trying to remember where I'm gonna get the light suit because I was frankly just kind of sick of looking at this one for as long as I had to. In the looks department, I think some people may be okay with this more than I was, but I just don't care too much for the way the dark suit looks in the first place. That's on me. Bottom line, I think if they gave us the dark suit a little bit later, maybe halfway through the second temple or something, a lot of my complaints surrounding it and the damage over time mechanic within the dark ether would be dealt with pretty well. And you know what, I want to add here real quick that this also extends to the light and dark beams. You get them so early in the game that you end up going most of the game without getting any suit or beam upgrades ever again. I liked how Prime 1 kinda drip fed me beams and suits every now and again as I explored Talon 4, but this game did it in a way that left me wanting to get another suit or another beam for so long before it actually happened. Anyway, let's move on. In my old video, I went on to complain about these rooms that you sometimes get locked inside of, forced to fight some invisible enemies before you can leave. And yeah, I don't think this is worth complaining about in terms of how good the game is, you know? It takes like a minute to get rid of them with your regular weapon, and less than that if you use your alternative beams to take them out. This is not a big deal. Beyond this though, I complained that the backtracking felt a little too forced, and in 2 specific instances I think this is true, but again, I don't think that holds the whole game back from being a great Prime game. Typically, in both Prime 1 and Prime 2, progression feels very natural. You're often led to a new elevator or connected to an old room right after getting a new upgrade, leading you to a place that you can use the new upgrade and wander to other places nearby where it might be able to be used as well. For some reason, with both the Seeker Missiles and the Power Bomb upgrade, we need to drop everything we're doing, run completely out of the area that we've been in for the last few hours, grab a quick upgrade somewhere else, and then go right back to where we came from in order to continue. These are the only 2 upgrades that do this in Prime 2, but it definitely feels strange to be forced out for like 20 or 30 minutes only to come right back to where I was to continue progressing to the end of the temple I'm in. If Prime 1 ever needed you to return to an older area for an upgrade, you'd probably find a new elevator that takes you there, or a shortcut to the one that you came from, yada yada. Prime 2 doesn't really connect its separate worlds with more than 1 elevator from each temple to each temple, so being brought back to old areas with no real direction other than a waypoint on my map doesn't feel super Metroidy. Moving on though, my next complaint in that original video was about the bosses that just look like regular enemies on steroids. And you know what? I'm still not a big fan of these guys. I do think their boss fights are fun in most cases and the mechanics work just fine, but the truth of the matter is, I just don't want it to feel like beating a big regular enemy is what's giving me a suit upgrade. The mini-boss designs aren't very creative a lot of the time because of this, and the fights don't usually feel like there's any real threat or importance when they come around. Functionally, I think they're just fine. Aesthetically, I wish it could have been different. Beyond the mini-bosses' designs though, I also had quite a bone to pick with the way some of the bosses worked in this game. My first time through, it felt like every boss took so long to fight. I felt as though I was waiting for so long to get my chance to deal a tiny amount of damage and then be forced again to wait for another window. This time around though, I realized that there were only a small number of bosses that even worked this way. And even with those bosses, if you use your highest damage output options whenever you get the chance to attack, it's not gonna be a very long fight. The boss I hated the most my first time through was Chica, or however you are supposed to pronounce that. I used to think this was the slowest boss fight of all time, but really, his first form can be dealt with in decent enough time, while his second form can be dealt with much faster, and is actually a really dope boss if I do say so myself. I liked all of the major bosses this time around, and the only one I actually disliked after a second playthrough is the third form of the final boss. It's simply just too hard to hit the light core inside of its mouth, making this fight take so long that I nearly decided to not finish the game for this review and just talk about all the points that I came up with on my way through. In my original video, after talking about these bosses, I moved on to talk about how lame it was that you needed to hunt down 9 Sky Temple keys after completing all 3 temples that we were tasked with clearing at the beginning, but this is just silly. Coming from Prime 1, I should have known there would be something akin to finding every artifact at the end of Prime 1. It only makes sense. It's like the escape sequence of the Prime series at this point in the games. It should be expected, but honestly, I like this just as much as the Prime 1 artifact hunt. No complaints from me on this part. And that pretty much covers what I said negative about Prime 2 in my old video, but let's sum up the way I feel about it now before this video ends. Dark Ether? Pretty great. Dark Suit? Probably should have given it to us a little bit later. Rooms you get locked inside of until you kill a couple of enemies? These are fine. Weird out-of-the-way backtracking? It almost never happens, and when it does, it's like a 20-minute detour. Not a huge deal. Bigger versions of regular enemies acting as mini-bosses that give you suit upgrades? Functionally, completely fine. I just wish they looked different or more unique. Slow boss fights? Not really. I think this was a get-good moment that I self-reported to all these years ago. Finding 9 Sky Temple keys? Expected from an installment of the Prime series, and decently fun to track down at that. Nearly everything I complained about 3 years ago feels like it wasn't really a big deal at all this time through the game. I will say some of these things can still be pretty annoying in the spots that they do show up, but just don't be like I was the first time I played this game. Don't let these small things ruin your whole experience with Prime 2 because there's a lot of really good game to be played here. It is still my least favorite Prime game of the trilogy. I really like number 1 and number 3, but I would never be one to call it a bad Prime game ever again. That is very much not the case. Every good game has a few bad design choices, and Prime 2 is no different from that. Hopefully, this was a decent enough way to refute the things I said about this game back in the day, and hopefully as well, you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share, favorite, repost, buy me a drink, get us some lunch while you're out, and I'll see you with a brand new video very soon. My name's Myloe, and I'm out.